Hey, welcome back, everybody. Good Monday. Hopefully, we had a wonderful weekend, and hopefully, we're getting ready because we've got a busy week ahead here in the weather department as what is likely to be Hurricane Francine moving through the Gulf of Mexico and towards the Gulf Coast of the United States, really with landfall possible within the next 48 to 72 hours. So things are definitely moving quick here. We got the latest information on that for you. Again, this is a storm that could undergo rapid intensification, and unfortunately, that's something we're all too familiar with here in the Gulf of Mexico. So again, we'll break all that down for you in today's video, but there is more than Francine to talk about as well. We have more areas to watch out there in the Atlantic. Also, I'm worried about a severe weather and flooding concern, kind of aided by Francine here going through the middle of this week and towards the weekend through portions of the country. So again, I'm going to break all that down for you in today's video. Now, if you're new here and you haven't already subscribed, please do so. We're trying to get to 10,000 by the end of hurricane season, and we're getting relatively close. Only need about 800 more people. So again, if you want to kind of jump on board and help us out there, definitely do so. Also, like the video, share it with somebody that you know that lives in this area that could use the information. And comment, let me know, what you're kind of doing to prepare for Francine if you're in the path. And if you're not in the path, then let me know kind of just what you got going on this week and what kind of weather you're seeing out there. Now, I have not been very good at responding to comments the past couple of days. I do apologize. I was out of town all day Saturday, and then yesterday I was kind of swamped with homework. So again, I do apologize about that, but I definitely read them. I promise I read them all the time, no matter what, the good ones and the bad ones. Again, I'll try to get back to responding to some of those today. Also, I don't want to guarantee anything. I'll try to get a video out this evening if I can. Again, it'll really depend on the homework schedule, but should I have some time, I'll get one out for you for the evening update, and then we'll be back tomorrow morning no matter what, whether there's a video out tonight or not. With that said, though, let's go ahead and jump on into things because, again, a lot to talk about here with what is potential Tropical Cyclone 6 currently, but likely, again, to become Tropical Storm and eventually Hurricane Francine going through this coming week. So here she is. Again, right now, not a named storm as of this morning. Now, if you're watching this afternoon, very likely could be a named storm by then. But it definitely has that look on satellite. Now, again, you're saying, well, there's no eye, there's nothing here. What are we talking about? But it's very often that in the Gulf of Mexico, we see kind of these big blobs of convection eventually turn into tropical systems. And you can already kind of see how the upper level winds are getting fanned out here from this system. If I could draw an arrow, that is, you can kind of see that general idea here in the clouds. So again, conditions becoming favorable. We're also starting to see a little bit of a spin here under these hot towers at the surface. Again, we are getting very close to having Tropical Storm Francine, and winds, I'll mention, are already at 50 miles an hour with this system. So not even a named storm yet. And once it gets that name, it'll already be a mid-grade tropical storm. So it's not going to take much for this to hit hurricane status. And again, that is the latest forecast from the National Hurricane Center is for that transition to a hurricane here within the coming days. So again, right now on satellite, again, you see all this cloud cover. That's the storm getting going. Expected to become a tropical storm this afternoon. So again, if you're watching this this morning, not a tropical storm yet. If you're watching it this afternoon, very likely already is and will be a tropical storm with 50-mile-an-hour winds. And then from there on, the intensification game begins throughout the evening tonight into tomorrow. By the time we're getting into tomorrow afternoon, latest forecast is for this to be a borderline hurricane with 70-mile-an-hour winds. Again, only about 5 miles an hour away from hurricane status, and then crossing that hurricane threshold here by Wednesday morning as a Category 1 hurricane. And then the latest forecast for Wednesday afternoon is an 80-mile-an-hour Category 1 hurricane moving towards the coast of Louisiana. And then likely landfall would be sometime Wednesday evening and overnight into the early morning hours of Thursday. So again, this is quick. This is Monday now. We're going to have landfall, in 48 to 72 hours. So really not far from now at all. And unfortunately, we've had so many storms like this, it feels like, where we really just don't get that much of a lead time from the actual formation and the landfall. Most of the things that have formed way out to sea haven't really made it to the United States as of late, at least. And again, it's really just been a lot of last-second rapid intensification in the Gulf. Now, inland impacts will be a concern, and we're going to dive into those impacts. Again, obviously, you folks at the coast in Louisiana are the number one priority, where we will see more water impacts from the ocean, meaning storm surge and higher winds. But inland up the Mississippi River Valley, I am concerned for a flooding threat, also a severe weather threat. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised, and again, it's a little early here, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a localized tornado outbreak out of this. Going towards the second half of this work week after landfall. And I'll talk about why that is here in just a second. But again, Going to remain a tropical storm as it works through Louisiana overnight Wednesday into Thursday. And then by Friday morning and Thursday afternoon, getting to post-tropical cyclone and just tropical depression status, where the winds will become much less of a concern the further inland you go. But I'll mention again, if you're anywhere kind of in this area, winds could be a concern with this storm as you're close enough to the coast. And this storm is moving at a relatively decent clip compared to some of the other ones that we've seen, like Debbie, which stalled out. This one's moving, pretty fast here, or at least it will be. So again, winds could move relatively far inland. But that's the latest track from the National Hurricane Center. Let's take a look at some models here. The good news is we don't have to show a whole bunch of models because honestly, they're in pretty good agreement. So I'll just show you a couple today. We'll kind of breeze on through it. But this is the latest GFS, or the American model, initializing for this afternoon. And again, pressure already down near 1,000 millibars, potentially even below that as the storm begins to form. Again, already a lot of thunderstorm activity. So that's really deep in the pressure and up to the wind field. It's just not technically a closed low at the surface yet, which is why it's not technically a storm at the time of recording this, but is still so strong. So we move this ahead through time. Again, strengthening is going to be the theme throughout today. Eventually, we get to tomorrow too. This is tomorrow afternoon and evening. We've got a tropical storm and a pretty feisty one, again, getting near hurricane status at this point as this moves just offshore of the Texas Gulf Coast. Now, if you're watching along the Gulf Coast of Texas, we will see impacts out of this. Definitely some rain bands will try to work onshore, some gusty winds. Even, I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of storm surge in here. Again, onshore flow will be pointing towards the Texas Gulf Coast, but a landfall looks very unlikely for you folks in Texas at this point, which is definitely a piece of good news. So we move this ahead into time, and then this is when things become a little bit more serious in terms of impacts. This is getting into Wednesday afternoon. Now definitely a hurricane at this point, 980 millibar low. That's probably going to be in the Category 1 hurricane threshold, and probably a pretty good Category 1 at that, with winds near 80, 85 miles an hour as this moves towards the Louisiana Gulf Coast. Now, again, the GFS brings this even lower to 974 millibars. This is getting up near Category 2, borderline major hurricane status as this moves towards, again, really the central Gulf Coast of Louisiana. So, again, if we want to go back and just look at some of those communities, basically right where this line is where that landfall is, near Abbeville, Kaplan, Lake Arthur, and Franklin, Louisiana, Morgan City, kind of in that stretch there could be, the areas that see the worst of it as it moves ashore. And then eventually, again, that's Wednesday afternoon and evening landfall, I will mention, and then moves inland. We'll talk about the inland impacts separately here in just a second. But that's the GFS. Let's take a look at the European model. Similar story. Again, the storm deepens over the next couple of days. Same story for Texas. It takes a little bit longer to get its act together on the European, and the pressure's a little bit higher here, but eventually does get its act together. This is Wednesday morning. Again, the storm moving towards the Louisiana Gulf Coast here as a hurricane probably, and gets quite strong, much like the GFS did, gets this down near 977 millibars. That's again going to be probably Category 2 hurricane, again, on approach. But notice what happens here, and this is going to be an interesting part of the forecast. Obviously, the storm looks to be strengthening upon landfall, but it's kind of a yes and no. I definitely think up to Wednesday afternoon, this is going to probably get up near max intensity, but after that, notice the pressure drops a little bit here, and it drops, let me phrase that, it gets higher, I should say, from about 975 millibars to about 985 millibars by landfall, and then the European has a later landfall here, a little bit closer towards the midnight hour on Wednesday into Thursday, and then moves inland. And we'll talk about why we could see a little bit of a weakening trend up to the last second, but I think now through Wednesday afternoon, the storm does not have much that's going to stop it. It's kind of that last 12 hours up to landfall that if we're lucky and the atmosphere helps us out here, we could see a little bit of weakening with the storm. And again, we'll take a look at why that is in just a second. But one more model, or I guess two more models, will show you the Icon model. Has done the best with this storm, and for some reason it has done great in this part of the country, or part of the world, I guess, this hurricane season. So we'll show it to you here. And, we move this ahead into time. Again, a strengthening low pressure system, and much like the other models, gets us up near hurricane strength, and then moves into Louisiana as, again, about a 980 millibar low. And then this would be even earlier on this model. This is more Wednesday morning into Wednesday afternoon landfall. So just to summarize all the global models here, all of them have landfall at around 980 millibars, give or take 5 or 10 millibars. So pretty good consistency there. Also, track-wise, most of them bring this somewhere in this region, right through the central Louisiana Gulf Coast. So all things considered, again, we don't have a lot of time till landfall, but the models are really kind of getting into pretty good agreement here, which is what you want to see. And I'll show you just one more model really quickly here. This is the H-Wharf model, just to show you it's kind of agreeing. This is a hurricane model, so not a global model. It's built just for hurricanes. And basically does the same as the other models and then brings us inland. This would be 11 p.m. or about 10 p.m. Central Time Wednesday night into Thursday, as again around a 980 millibar low. So good news, the models are agreeing. That's what you want to see. Now, the caveat here, or the potential wrinkle in the forecast for intensity in a good way, I should mention, is kind of a couple of ingredients we're going to look at. So obviously for a hurricane to form, you want very warm sea surface temperatures, you want very moist air, and you want a lack of wind shear are kind of the big three. Now, sea surface temperatures, I can tell you right now, that's unfortunately not going to be a problem for this hurricane. It's plenty warm enough in the Gulf of Mexico, and we've been talking about that all summer. We've been saying the Gulf is primed up and ready for a hurricane. Well, here it is. But the other two ingredients could get a little bit less conducive for development towards the end of the life cycle of this storm. Now, at the beginning, this is absolutely, off to the races. You'll notice here, if we take a look at kind of the current moisture field, there is plenty of moisture here in the Gulf of Mexico now through tomorrow afternoon. But as we move this ahead into time, watch what happens up towards landfall. Again, this is getting into Wednesday afternoon and evening. A lot of dry air over Texas and Oklahoma is going to try to wrap itself into the storm, much like kind of what happened to Debbie. If you remember, that storm upon landfall got very lopsided with some dry air there on the western side of the storm. I think this one could be similar, although I don't think this is going to be quite as severe as Debbie. With the dry air intrusion, I think the storm's going to be able to fight it off a little bit better, but I do think it will at least limit the rapid intensification after Wednesday afternoon upon those final hours of landfall, and then eventually it works its way inland and that dry air really takes over, and then that's when we'll shift to that severe weather concern. Again, I've said this a lot, and you'll probably just know off of previous experiences in your life, but anytime we get this dry air to intrude into these tropical systems upon landfall, that is a recipe for tornadic activity, and unfortunately I think this one really could be a prolific tornado producer after landfall here through our Thursday and our Friday, and also a flooding threat as well for places even outside of the Mississippi River Valley, which we'll talk about that later on, but just know that is something I am concerned with. Now, another piece of hurricane forecasting here is wind shear. Now, anywhere you see these brighter colors on your map, just know that that is less conducive in a way for development. It kind of also depends the way that the wind barbs are going, but just know again now through tomorrow afternoon and really up to Wednesday, the storm has a real lack of wind shear here in the Gulf of Mexico, meaning it is conducive for development. So this is why if we get rapid intensification, it's going to be over the next 48 hours through Monday afternoon, through Tuesday afternoon, and even into Wednesday morning. But by the time we get to Wednesday afternoon, we've got a pretty strong jet here, or a piece of the jet stream. This is a little bit more of a tropical jet down this far south. But you'll notice these are strong winds aloft. This is something that's not very conducive for hurricanes. In fact, this would definitely help kind of rip the storm apart a little bit in a way. Now, again, it depends the exact way that the wind barbs are moving. Generally, you want it to kind of rip right over the storm. Unfortunately, some of these wind barbs are kind of going around the storm. That could help it a little bit more and be a little less helpful to us in terms of weakening it. But I do think wind shear will play at least some factor in weakening the storm, again, upon the final hours up to landfall. But again, like I said, now through Wednesday afternoon, this storm has plenty of legs to run. It's really that last 6 to 12 hours before landfall that things could help us out a little bit and weaken the storm slightly. All right, so what kind of concerns are we going to have here? Well, flooding will definitely be a big one. We've already got a moderate risk of flash flooding through really all of coastal Louisiana, from Lake Charles through New Orleans, Lake Pontchartrain, even up into southwestern Mississippi there towards the Jackson area. And even inland, we're going to see some flooding here through Memphis, Little Rock, potentially up the Mississippi River Valley towards Cape Girardeau. And also, I think areas of the mid-Atlantic could see flooding as well. And I'll show you why here later on. But just know flooding will be a concern, even potentially down at the Gulf Coast of Texas. Now, wind speeds are also going to be a concern. Tropical storm force wind speed probabilities have upticked for sure. In fact, we're already seeing it with the storm. But I think a very high likelihood that we'll see at least some tropical storm winds here through much of the Gulf Coast of Louisiana. And I would expect this map to increase through the next couple of days. I would expect the numbers or the chances of those winds to increase And if we look at hurricane wind speed probabilities, it's on the map. It's not very high right now, but again, I expect this to increase. Normally, they start kind of conservative and then bump these numbers up. So personally, I think wherever the storm landfalls, there will be hurricane force wind speeds or at least hurricane force wind gusts there through the central coast of Louisiana. Also, storm surge will be a concern. We've yet to get an actual storm surge map from the NHC, but anywhere, again, on the right side of that storm. So let's say that we get landfall right here into the central part of the coast of Louisiana. Anywhere on this right-hand side is going to see storm surge. And unfortunately, Louisiana has such a shallow coastline. Again, it's a very swampy area. The storm surge can go miles inland before giving up. And if we've got a Category 1, maybe even a Category 2 storm, that's going to be plenty strong enough to really bump up those storm surge probabilities. And again, we'll touch on that more once we get a map from the NHC, but just know that will be a concern, and I would expect some sort of evacuation orders in Louisiana. So obviously pay attention to local authorities. If they tell you you got to go, definitely take that warning and get on out of there. All right, let's talk about inland impacts a little bit more here with, again, future Francine, and we'll just use the GFS. This is Wednesday evening. Again, give or takes, 12 or so hours on the timing here. Some of the models are a little bit quicker, some are a little slower, but I think generally Wednesday evening is a safe bet for landfall within, again, 6 hours or so. So here we go. Again, this moves inland. That big shield of rain is going to move inland, some gusty winds as well, I think, through the overnight Wednesday into Thursday. But as we get into Thursday morning, look at all this rain. This is definitely going to cause a flooding concern. Again, a lot of Gulf moisture here moving inland, and at the same time, Atlantic moisture is moving inland. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch here, and I am concerned about flooding even into the Carolinas. And I'll talk about that a little bit more here as well. But also Thursday afternoon, a tornado threat. Again, we talked about that dry air. Notice that we have some lighter rain returns here and then kind of some darker returns over here. This could, again, lead to a tornado threat. We're going to have a lot of velocity and shear, just kind of all of the values you need for tornadoes here due to this strong low pressure system. That combined with some dry air could increase instability significantly and could lead to a tornado threat somewhere, I think, probably through Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, maybe even Georgia here for our Thursday afternoon, and Louisiana as well, I should also add, especially up to landfall and just after landfall. Now we move this into Friday afternoon, and this is whenever I think, it looks like on the map things are calming down. I think the severe weather threat will calm down a bit on Friday, but the flooding threat I think could increase for some folks, and here's why. You'll notice, it might be kind of hard to see, but notice the kind of orientation of these isobars. We have some pretty good cold air damming occurring, or basically we just have shallow cold air at the surface here getting funneled down due to some high pressure through the mid-Atlantic, specifically the foothills of North Carolina and South Carolina, and at the same time, you've got this low pressure that at the mid-levels is bringing pretty strong wind here out of the Atlantic. So what's going to happen, again, you got this shallow cold air at the surface, so I'll just kind of pretend that my hand is a dome of cold air. This is the cold air, and I know I don't have a lot of space to show this, but what's going to happen is that warm air is going to hit that cold air, and it's going to be forced to rise up and over it, and that rising motion is going to lead to a lot of precipitation due to those high precipitable water values off of the Atlantic. And again, I'm concerned about a flooding threat here into the Carolinas, specifically the foothills of the Carolinas, where that cold air damming is going to be even more prevalent towards this weekend. So Friday and then into this weekend, you'll notice, look at these rain kind of showers picking up into that region. And also scattered showers, I should mention, will continue through the Ohio River Valley as the storm lingers on through the weekend as well. So inland impacts will be a concern, a potential rainfall through the next week. Gulf Coast of Texas, again, we're going to get some onshore bands, but the bigger rainfall totals will be through Louisiana, where half a foot to a foot of rain is not out of the question where the core of the storm goes over, and then up through the Mississippi River Valley, a good 3 to 5 inches of rain, I think, is going to be a pretty safe bet through Arkansas and Mississippi. Down through the southeast, Florida, Georgia, you're not going to probably get as much directly from the storm, but we do still have a stalled out frontal boundary over those regions, which is leading to some increased rainfall chances. And then up through the Ohio River Valley, again, some pretty good rainfall totals. But notice this specifically, right here through upstate South Carolina, this I-85 corridor, Oconee County, Pickens County, Greenville, Spartanburg County, Table Rock, even up through Brevard, Hendersonville, and these kind of areas here right at the foot of the mountain chain. Notice some of these higher totals. We got some of these areas getting more than 4 inches of rain, and you'll notice how it's kind of displaced from the rest of the heavy rainfall. It's almost like, where's this coming from? Well, again, that cold air damming combined with some upslope flow could really ring out some heavy rainfall totals through those areas, and I would be concerned about that if I'm in that area for some potential flash flooding going later into this week. So again, just make sure you got a way to get those watches and warnings. Outside of there, again, the tropics do have more going on. We have other areas to watch out here, all sorts of little waves, to kind of circle here that we're monitoring, and the National Hurricane Center is also monitoring. Also, more waves coming off of Africa, and you would expect this. Again, we're in peak hurricane season currently, so it's not out of the norm to see all of this, tropical activity out there. And again, the NHC has highlighted some of it here, with both of these areas having a 60% chance of developing within the next 7 days. Out here in the central Atlantic. Now, the good news is we've got plenty of time to watch these, and there's not really any impacts to land expected within the next 7 days. Let's see if I can find the right way to move my face out of the way. Sorry. So again, that's the good news. But we take a look at some ensemble data. Definitely a lot of members do develop these storms, but this is even going out 10 days, and you'll notice none of these lines crossing over land. Not to say that these storms can impact land further on down the road, but we got a slow start to it. Again, this is the European. We take a look at the GFS and its ensemble members. A couple more members try to get this down towards the Caribbean, but still, overall speaking, I would be surprised if we have any impacts to land outside of Francine in the next 7 days. So that's kind of the good news there in the tropics. But again, we'll be watching it for you, and I'll keep you up to date. All right, let's talk about what's going on back home a little bit now, and this part of the video is not going to last very long, but it's probably a good thing. That means things are relatively quiet. Now, taking a look at satellite imagery, again, still this big occluded low level up here into portions of eastern Canada. Now, this is definitely bringing some strong wind down through the Great Lakes, and with that, some lake effect cloud cover and precipitation. Also, it's bringing the stalled out frontal boundary down through portions of the southeast, specifically Florida and the Gulf Coast states. So, things are relatively quiet right now, but not completely. Also, we do have a trough kind of working through the west. That is leading to some cloud cover and some showers as well out in that part of the country. So all things considered on radar, again, we're pretty quiet outside of Florida, where we have some showers and storms through the Great Lakes, specifically Pennsylvania and New York. We've got some showers working on through, and then a couple showers out west. But all things considered, a pretty quiet looking radar and a pretty quiet watches and warning map as well. Now, we'll look at the east here. Really not much. We did actually have some frost advisories for the mountains of West Virginia and Virginia. Again, it has been cool due to that high pressure that worked on through. But in terms of any hazards, heat advisories down towards Miami. Out west, some red flag concerns continue as it has been windy and dry. But other than that, things have been relatively quiet. Now, we do have a slight severe weather risk this afternoon, specifically through upstate New York, where that lake effect precipitation is carrying a lot of instability with it. So it's not impossible that we could see a couple downbursts this afternoon of some stronger winds here through Syracuse, Buffalo, into Utica, and kind of surrounding areas here of, again, upstate New York. Could see some strong storms. In fact, don't even completely rule out an isolated tornado. Again, we're going to see some water spouts, I think, that as they move, ashore could keep their rotation long enough that we get a very brief, isolated weak tornado. But again, just kind of interesting setup there that we have some lake effect severe weather. Don't see that every day. So kind of interesting for you folks. Now, we move this ahead into time. This is this afternoon. Again, notice these showers and storms working through upstate New York, even southern portions of Ontario and Quebec here. Could see a couple of those showers and storms. Again, wind will be the main threat if we see any severe weather. Outside of there, again, Florida, I'm sorry, it's going to continue to rain. Same thing for southern Georgia. It will be, scattered through southern Georgia, I think more isolated there, but through the Florida Peninsula, a rainy afternoon. And same story for the Gulf Coast of Texas. This is getting into Tuesday afternoon. You'll notice here comes our tropical system up towards Louisiana. Again, increasing rain chances ahead of it. For Tuesday, and then overnight into Wednesday. Again, just rainy through those regions, but outside of that, things remain pretty quiet through much of the country, which is good, and obviously we will take it. Now, looking through the rest of this week, we already kind of talked about this a little bit, but we'll show it again. Again, Francine moves inland. That's going to bring some rain showers through much of the Ohio River Valley, portions of the Mid-Atlantic, as I talked about. outside of that, things remain relatively zonal through the next 7 days or so. So again, we could see some showers and storms increase. Now, one thing to watch here is watch what happens up here. You'll notice this big area of high pressure potentially trying to dive down out of Canada into the northeastern United States. That could be another shot of cool air, through, maybe a week or so from now. But again, really the main story right now is Francine, and through the next 5 days, outside of the flooding I already talked about with Francine earlier, not too much going on. But I will show you temperatures here really quickly. Again, this is through this week. It's going to remain cool through the east, but we're going to warm up outside of where we're seeing rain from Francine. Again, that moves inland, keeps things a little bit colder. Also, we can have a chilly Friday and Saturday here into portions of the mid-Atlantic specifically, where again, that cool air at the surface kind of gets trapped, and could really keep things a little bit further down in the temperature column. But outside of that, things warm up for most of us before, again, potentially another cool down in the east about a week or so from now, as we could see some high pressure. Same story out west, some troughs kind of trying to work on through and cool things down. But again, main story right now is Francine, and that is kind of what we will continue to talk about. Alrighty, folks, I appreciate you tuning in there. Have a wonderful rest of your Monday. Again, I'll try to get a video out this evening. No promises, but I'll try my best. So again, if you haven't already subscribed, definitely do so. Like the video, comment, let me know where you're watching from. Have a great rest of your Monday, and I'll see you all next time.